It's a lot easier for this pirate to shiver when he has no skin. Here's your look at the boss fight studio H.A.C.K.S pirate mystical Tormentor. While some variations of the H.A.C.K.S skeletons seem to be just more larger versions of standard human skeleton, there are some who appear more mystical in nature. Emerging from the murky depths, these pirates prefer to rob, steal, and cause mayhem rather than engage in hand-to-hand combat. Rumors persist of a group of these pirates who tormented seagoers throughout the sea surrounding Jamaica, and indeed may have taken over Port Royal and held it as their own for a period of time. Now, just before anybody gets any bad ideas about pillaging and plundering, there's nothing of value in this studio except for the person behind the camera. With that being said, let's go ahead and measure the H.A.C.K.S skeleton here. And while I'm doing this as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at Boss Fights that did provide the sample of the mystical Tormentor that we could have a look in this review. As for his height, the pirated skeleton stands about 6 1/4 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 16 centimeters tall. Arr, and what a fine booty comes included with the skeleton. First of all, the figure comes included with an H.A.C.K.S, providing I can pick it up, an H.A.C.K.S display stand. It is very obviously molded here in red plastic. There are, though, a few little connecting points where, of course, you can take your figure's feet. Whether he does have skin on them or not, you can then plug them onto the provided pegs and have the figure displayed that way. I always like that they include stands like this. The figure also comes included with a tiny little mouse, and I don't know if it's just a stowaway or if it's perhaps one of the pets of the pirates that are on there. One good thing to be said about the rats, as far as I know, it's still living and breathing. It's not a skeletal rat, although if the rat was to die, would its skeletal remains still move around? That's a question I'll leave with you. It's a nice looking rat. I mean, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose. I suppose what you could always do is put it in, say, for example, the skeleton's hands and have him sort of just, I don't know if you want to just dangle the poor little rodent around by tail, but I suppose you could do it that way also if you wanted to as well. The figure also comes included with a series of weapons, starting perhaps with the smallest, the baby bear of the batch. The figure comes included with a dagger. The dagger itself is molded here nicely in a silver plastic. It looks to be like a little bit of black has been afforded to the handle or hilt of the dagger, and this can be stored in I'm thinking dragons, daggers, I don't know what I'm doing. You can put it into the skeleton's hands like that, or what you can also do as well. Did you know that there's a secret spot on the back of, you probably already did know because you saw at the beginning of the review, right at the very back of his sashed belt, there is in fact a loop. You can take then said loop and take said dagger and slide it into the back, whether it's a dragon or not. The figure also comes included, let's just get him to stand here, comes with 2 larger swords. I think this is a saber sword, possibly, as he seems to have a saber sword and a rapier sword. I always consider myself, when it comes to pirates, not that I'm a real resident expert when it comes to pirates, but I always consider pirates to be more the one that wields sabers rather than rapiers. You can let me know down below in the comment section. Obviously, the rapier sword is a much thinner blade. It's got more an enamored, elaborate-looking guard and hilt, molded nicely, painted possibly, in fact, in a silver paint, or you can also go the option of, as well as the saber. Now, the saber actually has a little bit more wear and tear to it. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. It's a cruder looking blade. It looks like it's got a few bird edges on the bottom of it. They, in fact, have colored the bottom of the blade a little bit different as well. It's not going to be drawing blood, so I'm not even going to run the attempt of doing that. But you can, of course, also have that held in his hand. This whole time, by the way, I've been actually trying to put it in his one hand, just to also show you as well, you can take any one of the swords or the dagger and slide it into this hand also as well. For all intents and purposes, you could really have the sword on this side, the saber on this side. You could have the rapier sword on this side. You can do whatever you want. One thing you can also do, too, is located on the side of its leg, what left of the leg he has, there is also a little section, a holster here for his sword. Now, you don't have to necessarily, I've noticed with both the cases of the rapier sword and the saber sword, that both store inside the holster. There's the rapier. We'll just do it quickly here with the saber sword. Just take this out of his hands quickly here. Be careful, by the way, while you are doing this. Don't do it so quickly, because obviously you don't want to break the guard that's on the front of it. But you can also take the saber sword and also slide that in there as well. So it's entirely up to you which sword you'd like to sheath on the side of the skeleton's body. The other thing that the skeleton does have also as well is an alternate head sculpt. Now, this one does have a bandana. It seems to be the case, though, that you can't remove the bandana from this one and transplant it to this one right here. The only thing obviously different between the two from a visual standpoint is the fact that this skeleton can't as visually see as well as this one does have a patch, possibly something similar to One-Eyed Willie. The thing that's also different about him is, I don't know if you can also tell, the fact that this one does have a wider jaw. And it also does benefit from the fact it does have, let me just get the figure to stand here for a second, it does also have a hingeable jaw. How about that? So you can open and close the mouth if you wanted to. I had hoped the same for this skeleton head, but it doesn't seem to be the case. You can't open and close this one. But it does have at least an eye patch and a bandana, so hey, there's that. If you did want to change out the heads, it's super easy. First of all, you just hold onto the torso, yank off the head from the provided ball socket, pop that in the new head. The new head, I find it helps to sort of twist it back and forth. There we go. It gives us, to be fair, a more generic-looking skeleton. It perhaps doesn't have the pirate pizzazz as this one right here with an eye patch, but there's also a couple of options as well. And definitely there's mileage to be made for picking up more than one of these. You can have yourself an army of skeletons. I like this one for the fact it does have an open and closed mouth, but I don't like it as much as perhaps this one just because it has an eye patch and a bandana. So you'll excuse me for right now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the skeleton head. I'm sure we'll come back to that in final looks. We'll just pop that off for right now, put on what I feel to be the better of the two heads, and then we'll resume with the rest of the review. The other thing that the skeleton does have is skeleton feet. If you prefer not to have boots, but rather feet instead, he has swappable feet. Just before I actually do that, though, the thing about the boots is the boots are two parts. So obviously this part here is going to be separate from the top of the boot. Now, when you are getting this, say, out of the packaging, you may notice that there's a gap space between the top of the boot and what will be the bottom of his feet. If you turn it, though, it may involve actually just rotating it around to get it all lined up, and you can tuck it further down than what it is, alleviating somewhat of the gap visually from the front, and maybe making it a little bit noticeable more on the back. To change out the feet, though, if simply just a case of, again, popping the feet off the ball peg. When you are popping them off, though, it's very crucial to know that the hole isn't straight down. Can you see it's actually more set up like a slipper? So when you are putting the peg back in, you're not putting it down as much like this. You're sliding it on like not so much a glass slipper, but you'll slide it on like a slipper. You'll also, of course, want to make sure you're sliding this piece off too. And again, this just is a case of lining up, making sure everything is lined up sort of accordingly, and then just kind of pull it off. It's not super easy to do. I mean, again, like it means, in fact, a little bit of heating up of the plastic, but you sort of have to twist the feet off. I'll do it on one side, and then I'll show you then what it looks like then on the other side. Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll keep it on one side, and then I'll keep the boot then on the other, and maybe eventually we'll then jump back to both of these when we have a look at the final looks of the figure. So anyways, making precautionary measures to make sure, of course, you got the bigger toe facing inward. Like I already mentioned, the fact that the hole actually is facing forward, not down. So when you are sliding on the slipper, you're actually sliding it on forward, not sliding it straight down. And again, you just sort of line everything up here, peg it in place, and providing I actually get this all the way in there. Do I have it all the way in there? I think I do. You have then the skeleton feet, or again, if you prefer, a pirate boot instead. You can go that option also as well. I think for me, when it's all said and done, unless I plan to maybe pick up another one of these, which very likely is high, I probably could just see myself sticking with the default of the way this guy came out of the packaging. His head sculpt looking like this, pirate patch in place, bandana, and probably still keeping the pirate boot in place, the pirate booties. I do like the idea that they at least give you like alternate pieces. Of course, as always the case when it comes to Boss Fight Studio, they're really good at including swappable parts. So if you decide to get more of these, or if you just decide you like the look a little bit better, easily you can just swap the pieces out. The feet aren't always the easiest thing to swap out because, again, like you're not popping them straight on this way. You're sliding, well, you already saw what I was doing. For the articulation on this guy, I'm going to stick awkwardly with one boot and then one bare foot. We're going to go probably change that up in final looks. But the head is on a very generous, and I mean very generous ball joint. It does rotate all the way around. The head does look down quite a lot, and up, and back, and forth. As for the shoulders just have as much freedom as the head. You can move them out at well, exactly 90 degrees. You can take them and move them forward. You can also move them back. There is a single hinge only in the elbow. Now, while doing that, making sure, of course, you're rotating it the right way. I think I may have actually had the arm facing this way when I got this out of the packaging. So you just want to make sure you're always aware of where that hinge actually is on the figure at all times. With the hinge in proper place, you can actually get a little less than 45. The hands also rotate all the way around. You can hinge them back and forth. The figure has an upper torso ball joint. That's nice to see. Despite even having all these tattered rags across its body, it still manages to retain decent articulation, considering he doesn't really have a torso. I suppose you could also, in theory, take this all off completely as well. It may involve actually maybe as much just taking the head off. Let's just see if we can. I've not yet done this. Simply just take the torso. You probably could slide it off. Yeah, there you go. You can slide it just completely off the torso, if that's an option you want to go with instead. And then that way you can see like full articulation. There's an articulation point at the top there, right underneath the rib cage, and then there's a secondary ball joint at the very base of the spine. Legs do split out. They're on ball joints after all. You can bring the legs forward, you can bring the legs back, only just by a little bit. And obviously, if you're going to have a rapier sword in the way of things, whether you're a skeleton or not, that's always going to prevent any bit of leg motions. Legs, I found, was really cleverly handled. What they actually have done is they put a hinge joint here at the top, or here at the bottom, here at the top, and then in the middle where a kneecap naturally would be is the point where actually the hinge is. So the hinge is here, and then you got the kneecap in the middle. Very nice, very smart. And then, of course, when it comes to the articulation on the feet, they move up and down this way. You can also rock them back and forth this way as well, whether you decide to use these boots or you want to stick with these boots also, or feet instead. I think as we've certainly made some progress to get this guy undressed, let's put on maybe the other head sculpt. One which, again, makes him just look more like a generic skeleton, but again, if that's the option you want to go with instead of having him more pirate and, well, not having him as much pirate and more skeleton, you have that option available as well. The thing I always really like about Boss Fight Studio is the fact that they do give you as much swappable options as they do. I mean, as we've already seen in this review, I started with this head sculpt. I started with this tattered rag that he has for clothing. And just with that alone, of just removing those parts, I've got almost, short of actually just changing out the boot, a completely different figure. We have looked at hero hacks here on this channel before, but nothing to the epic scale that we're getting here with the Mystical Tormentor Pirate. This is a more larger, more traditionally sized figure scale, and he fits in quite well. In fact, I probably should have brought in a couple of figures for comparisons, but he fits in quite well with other figures from other lines as well. Now, with the benefit of Boss Fight Studios is consistently the fact that they give you swappable options available. Now, if you look to the skeleton the way he looks now, and look to the way that the pirate started with when we started this review, there's been a lot of changes. In fact, I did change out the head sculpt because he does come included with two. Part of me does wish, though, that the alternate head sculpt, the one that we did start with that had the pirate patch, did also have a bandana that was removable. So if I did want to transplant the bandana to this head sculpt that now has the hingeable jaw, I could have done that. But that's okay. I still would have probably still preferred to display the figure. In fact, I will be displaying the figure right after this review with the pirate patch and the bandana, as it's my favorite look of the two. I, though, could see myself very easily going down the rabbit hole. I have said this countless times already when we looked at Boss Fight Studio figures before. With as many things that they give you to swap parts out on the figures, there's very much a likelihood that you won't just stop at picking one version of a figure up, like a Tormentor here, for example. You're probably going to see yourself picking up another one of these, so you can have the figure displayed in more than one look. One thing also I did want to mention as well is the storability. Is that even a word? A storability of all the accessories that he comes included with. Not really counting the pirate boots, but there is at least the storage space to store all the weapons that he wields. The rapier, for example, I've got him in his hand right now. Though not displayed on the figure here in final looks, there is a compartment space to store not only the saber on the side, but there's also a storage space on the back to store the dagger. It looks to also be the case that the sash belt could be possibly removable too, but I didn't want to really fight it over top of the hip bones and decided just to leave it in place instead. There's still enough changes, I feel, from where we started the review to where we're wrapping it up right now. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Boss Fight Studios for providing the Epic Hacks Pirate Mystical Tormentor that we could have a look in this review. What do you guys think of this figure? Is this something you could see yourselves going down a similar rabbit hole and picking up the line for yourself? FYI, though, by the way, even though we have finished up the Mystical Tormentor, we are also going to be looking at the Grim Spectre in an upcoming review, so stay tuned for that. If you guys enjoyed this video, by the way, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are also enjoying this content you're seeing here on the channel on a regular basis, and let's say you have not yet done it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and just next to that, neighboring to that, will also be a bell. Just ring that so you're going to get those notifications every single time a new video posts. And like I did already say, we're not just stopping with the Mystical Tormentor Pirate. No, in fact, we are going to be looking at a couple of other Epic Hacks figures, courtesy of the folks once again at Boss Fight Studio. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.